We are broadcasting live, and we thank all of you for joining us. So, someone has a mic on. You have to turn that mic down or off. Okay. All right. That is better. So, we thank you all for joining us. Go ahead and put in the chat exactly where you are from. What city are you in? And today we have our special guest on Table Talk. We have Dr. Graham. Now, let me just give you a little information about him. And I just thought this was very unique in this life that we're living, right? He's been married for 21 years, which to me is a miracle. 24? 24 years.
Next
So,
month. Next month.
24 years. Okay, I had it wrong. Okay, 24 years next month. So to me, that's a miracle. So for that, I have to give you a hand. That is great. Yes, to the same woman. Hallelujah. So that is great. His motto is, let me just make sure I have it right. I must reach my full potential and help others do the same. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. He's from a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and his degree is in psychology. And I'm going to welcome him today to our first table talk. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. So Dr. Graham, he has his own show on Instagram, and it's called
Auntie and Unc.
Auntie and Unc. So check it out. It is really good. All right. So this is the money mindset. So the first question that I have for you today is, what is the money mindset?
That's a broad spectrum question.
Mm-hmm.
The money mindset for which community? And you can start with the social economical groups. Poor, middle class, upper class. You can then go to the ethnic groups in America: white, black, Latino, and so forth. But simply put, it's how you have been socialized to view money is the way I see it. Growing up poor, we were socialized to spend money. You got money, you spent it to survive. Um, Raising my son in the lower middle class, if you will, lower to middle class, you try to learn to save money. You spend it, you spend what you need to spend, you save for a rainy day, or you save for that particular item. But your middle class mindset is to save. And then what I've learned, I haven't gotten there yet. I'll tell you about it when I get there. But the wealthy, they invest it. That's their mindset. They look at money 10, 20 years in advance. How can I make this money work for me? How can this money be making more money while I'm asleep? And so the mindset is, what you've been socialized to, and then what have you allowed yourself to be exposed to? And then ultimately, what are you aspiring to? Because you can have, as we see with the professional athletes, they have a lot of money, but if they keep a poor mindset, they'll spend themselves right back to where they came from. And many of them do so. There was a stat maybe 10 years ago that 80% of professional athletes are broke within 5 years of retirement. And that would lend to the idea that they had the money, but they didn't have the mindset to go along with the money. So they just spent with the spending mindset until they were right back where they came from.
Wow. So how do we acquire the money mindset instead of the poverty mindset? How does one, if you grew up in a poor area and you grew up spending, right? How do you then change that concept in your head?
Well, it's like with anything, psychological, there are two ways that behavior is changed. Either you change you change your mind, or you change the cognition, the way you think, to affect your behavior, or you change your behavior for a long enough period of time to change the way you think. Ideally, the fastest way is to do both at the same time, right? So in today's time, we have YouTube University. We have the internet. So the question then is, what are you exposing yourself to? So, I have a 23-year-old son who, and I'm about transparency. So I told my son growing up, don't follow the behaviors and the habits of your dad when it comes to money, because I'm a spender. We're going to have a good time when you go out with your dad, but when we try to figure out where the money is when it's over, it's going to be gone. I hope you had a good time, because I'm going to spend. Anytime you want to look at better money habits, follow the lead of your mother. So with that said, now at 23, he's a saver that's looking forward to investing. He is one that this time last year, he had no credit history at all. And before he got a credit card, he went to YouTube University. He did his research. He found his certain YouTubers that he watched as it related to building credit. And he brought back some things and some questions to his mother and I, that some things I was not familiar with. And he built his credit to the point where he is now in a position with a grad assistantship, at a job where he can purchase a brand new car, because his credit, again, he exposed himself. He used the internet to expose himself to something different than what we are currently living, thinking about where he wants to go in life. So
that's wonderful.
So not just being consumed with where we are, but thinking about, how can I build towards where I want to go? How do I want to live, when I get there?
That is so true. We don't usually think that far in advance. How do I want to live when I get there? That's good. I'm going to write that down. My other question is that Blacks, since I'm Black, I'm more concerned with people who look like me.
Yes, ma'am.
We are at the bottom of the economic scale, right? The economic ladder. So how did that happen?
The economy was built on us this American economy was built on us being at the bottom of the scale. We came here we were brought here. Let me correct myself. We didn't come here. We were brought here as free labor. And brought here as free labor, but brought from a plethora of different countries, a plethora of different cultures, a plethora of different mindsets, if you will, as it related to wealth. And even in that economy that we were sold into, part of that selling of us, we were sold out by some of our own people, not realizing that they would never see us again. We were crossing that pond we call the Atlantic Ocean. So when we got here, we were stripped of our culture, we were stripped of our languages, we were stripped of the mindsets that we had as it related to property and wealth and anything that we had as African people, all of that was taken from us and stripped from us to never be seen again. You fast forward to us being freed from slavery and all of that wealth of knowledge being stripped from us, and then adding the ingredient of us being divided and conquered and then pitted one against another. The house versus the field.
Yes.
That we still see the impact of that today, where we don't know how to support one another economically. In America, we are the largest group of spenders.
Yes.
In America. And simultaneously, we are the largest group that spends outside of our community. So the black dollar circulates far less than any other ethnic dollar circulates in this particular community in America. And much of it has to do with how we have been conditioned. It is by design. We may not realize it, we may not understand it, but we are participating in something that has been designed to keep us kind of like that gerbil on the wheel as long as possible. And until we make a concerted effort to identify the fact that we celebrate the wrong behaviors as it relates to spending in our community, I'm guilty. So I'm talking about us. I'm not talking about, I ain't saying y'all, I'm saying we. I've been buying polo since the 90s, right? And I'll tell you all the reasons why I need to buy Ralph Lauren and why I need to buy a shirt that's $25 and up. But at the end of the day, I don't know how many of Ralph Lauren's grandchildren I've put through college just by purchasing his apparel, right?
Right.
We buy these symbols of wealth to make ourselves feel good because often we don't have the wealth. And then those of us that do make it out, we don't often tell the story about how we made it out. We don't often tell the story about what it is to live now that we're out. We tell the stories that we either make up stories about how down bad we were and we really weren't down that bad, or we tell the bad part of our stories to the rest of us and we end up gravitating to, I think about the rap culture. So I'm a hood snob. So I'm from North Philly, Erie Avenue in Philly. If there's anybody out there that knows anything about North Philly, and I grew up in the late 80s, the early 90s during the crack epidemic. And, crack hit my home. Stat Pop cracked out. I was surviving. And the things that I was doing, I was trying to get out of my situation. The things that people around me were doing, if it was selling drugs or whatever their hustles were, we were trying to get out. Now we look at people that don't have to do those things because they want to be in, which makes no sense. The sense of it is that those of us that have made it out are celebrating the foolishness that we participated in, but not necessarily the successes that we are experiencing as a result of making it out. So when I think about certain, some of those that we call the greatest rappers of all time, Tupac, you went to acting school, bro. Like you had a different experience that others of us didn't have in the hood. Mom was an activist. You were exposed to some things that you could have shared more about earlier, to help. And I believe he was on his way. He was on his way to that before his untimely death. Biggie, you talking about the 1st and the 15th. in your rhymes, like you didn't eat. And his mom did she's in a documentary. She says, does Christopher look like he's never eaten? He's never missed a meal. Right? You know, there's YouTube footage of Biggie on his avenue rapping in a Catholic school uniform. Again, you had an experience. Mom was a teacher. Nas, you know, mom was a teacher, dad was a jazz musician. So these are people that, you know, you got into things because you chose to, but you didn't necessarily have to. And there were other things. Rick Ross, you were a college athlete on scholarship, so you knew how to make it to college. I haven't heard one bar spit about how to make it to college or how to become a college athlete, and you were a CO. So you held a job, either getting paid by your county or your state. But you know, we want to act as if, and so you make it out, but then the message that you portray keeps so many others down. And the entities outside of us, they want to continue to applaud you to keep doing that, because then we stay out the way. And as long as we stay out the way, they know that this threat of the intellectual African American is not a behemoth that they have to contend with. So as long as they keep us in entertainment and keep us in, we dominate every arena that we get into.
Everyone.
So what would it look like if we got into the financial arena?
Let's do it. Let's get in there and find out, right? That's what we need to do. Yes.
And then what do we? I remember growing up, and I'll be 50 soon. I remember growing up, and there were certain jobs that you heard the adults in the community talk about they were trying to get into. Mm-hmm. You know, in North Philly, it was Tasty Cake. It was Buds, which was a automotive mechanic, construction type manufacturing company. It was SEPTA, which was the transportation system in Philly, and Temple University, or the hospitals.
Okay. Yeah.
So those were like the 5 jobs that if you got a job in any of those 5 jobs in the hood, you made it. And we're not talking about Temple Hospital as a doctor. We're talking about just as an orderly or working in dietary. Like, you've made it, right? Why weren't we aspiring to become doctors? Why weren't we aspiring to become physician's assistants? I have this issue every time I go into the hospital. I look at the ethnic groups that people belong to in certain positions. And for our community, if we're working in a hospital, it's usually only as transportation or in the kitchen. Why? If we are on the care staff, it's a CNA. You know, it's an assistant, not necessarily a nurse. You start looking at the nurses, they're predominantly white female. You start looking at the physician assistants, they're predominantly Asian female. Then you get to the doctors, it's predominantly white males and or Indian or Asian males, right? Why don't we start positioning our kids early to start looking at these positions, these opportunities, so that when they when their gifts start to bud and their interests start to bud, they're already slanted toward those things. So sometimes it's not that we aim so high and miss. Sometimes it's that we aim so low and hit.
Aiming too low. Okay, that's good. So now you made me think about what they call Black Wall Street, right? But I'm going to call it Negro Wall Street, because back in those days, they didn't call us black. They call us Negroes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So how do we get our communities? Because right now we don't have families have fallen down. Well, let me start at the beginning. People are broken. That means families are broken because everything follows suit. It's a domino effect. So we don't even eat together as a family anymore, you know. So how do we get all of that on track so that we can get our finances on track? Because I'm a believer that we need to build the person first, but you're the expert.
In the early 1900s, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a book called The Philadelphia Negro.
Okay.
To your point.
I'm going to write this down because I'm going to get that book.
Yes, ma'am. The Philadelphia Negro. He predicted that the state of Philadelphia at that time, and this was the roaring 20s going into the Great Depression, that if things did not change, if government, educators, and business leaders did not come together to devise a plan, he predicted exactly what we are experiencing now and have been experiencing in the city of Philadelphia or in most of our major cities since 1968, the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois would not be surprised because he predicted it. And what he predicted was there was a confluence of major shifts in American society that took place at the turn of the century. You had the two great migrations of African Americans moving north in large number, the numbers that had never been seen before, obviously. You had the Great Depression, and as a result of the Great Depression, President Roosevelt created the New Deal, which wrapped into that was welfare, right? Let me dispel the myth, first and foremost, that people say welfare was created for poor Black people. Black people were poor since we've been poor since we got here. So
good point. Good point.
Well, welfare was created for the new poor white people that emerged after the Great Depression.
Okay.
The problem was they could not anticipate whites that had businesses firing the few Blacks that did have businesses so that they could hire their community members. Now, many people will say, oh, that's racist. That's called survival because we would have all done the same thing. I would have done the same. If I had a business and we're in the tough times that we in right now, and I got community members sitting at my table that I need to break bread with, and I can put you onto a job tomorrow and get rid of another somebody from a different community, I'm going to do that.
You're going to do it, right?
Every day, all day, right?
Yes, yes.
So that's not racist. That's called self-preservation, right?
Okay.
So they couldn't anticipate the self-preservation. The racism began when you had standards of how much you were going to give individuals on what they call the relief rolls, we now know as welfare. But then when Black people started showing up to the relief rolls, you lessened the amount. That's racist. So when we began to move north simultaneously in the Great Migrations, we were coming in so many numbers that the industries, the manufacturing industries where the jobs were that we were coming north for, They got maxed out. So those of us that couldn't get jobs, we had to go to the relief rolls, right?
Wow. Okay.
So you have the Great Depression, you have the Great Migration, and then you have the shift from the agrarian society and the Industrial Revolution, which really was what the Civil War was about. It wasn't about freeing slaves. It was about two different economies needing either a low income employee base or a free income employee base. So that confluence of events put us in a place where many of us, those that got to the party late as African Americans to the North, those adults had kids that went to them to get into the welfare lines, and those kids learned, this is how I get money.
Oh, that I didn't know. Okay, yeah, I didn't know that.
So
okay.
think about in your family, think about in your community. You have some people that are educated, right? And then you have some people that are not so educated. So as a kid, I always thought like, so that always perplexed me, you know, like why are there two groups of Black people? Like in my own family, I got these people over here that are educated, and then I got these gully folk over here. Right. So as I got older, I realized and began to study, I realized that that group that came to the party early, that first migration group, and or those Blacks that got to the North before, I mean, even while slavery was going on, they were able to assimilate. They had education. They had businesses. They had things. They had the American experience to the point that an African American could have it. But then the first migration that came north, they were able to plug in to those same networks. But the second migration that came, there were no more jobs. So I got to go to the relief rolls, and I got to take my kids with me. And my kids are being developed. Their minds are being developed. So they're mommy, I want. Well, you can't have, because this is all we have. So how does a kid answer? We all made that statement as kids. I can't wait till I grow up so I can. So if I have parents that work, how do I finish that statement? So I can get my own job, so I can make my own money, right? Well, if I don't have parents that work and all they get is a chidak, then I finish that statement with, I can't wait till I grow up so I can get a check, right? Or until I can be like the corner boy, or till I can be like the stick-up kid, or till I can be like the hustler, or fill in the blank with something other than working a job. So, and then think about, the era that we grew up in. Kids are spoken to but not heard. So you're not explaining to your kids what's going on.
Right.
But the child is still developing. They're still a developing person, and they're grabbing the bits and pieces of their existence to figure out how they need to survive in the future. So we have generation after generation after generation, to the point where, I'm talking about the Industrial Revolution. Well, we've now lived through the Industrial Revolution to the deindustrialization of a city like Philly, and again, most industrialized cities of the North, where manufacturing companies are gone. So you worked until the 8th grade, and then you went and worked at the factory. So now we're working. I remember my step pop, undereducated dude, made $15 to $20 an hour. Once that job closed in the mid 80s, from then until his death, he never made $15 to $20 an hour again. Being undereducated. Now multiply that time with whole community. Now take that across every city in the North across this country. And then look at the kids that were raised in those environments, undereducated, they weren't pushed to do more in the academic realm because the parents didn't think they needed to. You just go work at the factory when you get of age. Well, the factory jobs stopped in the 80s, from the 50s to the 80s. Now you need an education, because what then came after the industrial age, the information age. So there's all of those components that, kind of like, in Pittsburgh, they had the confluence of the three different rivers that come together to make the one river. You have all those different streams coming together to a connect point, and then you have one group of people that are at the center of that point. We then are positioned to be taken advantage of, and pushed and pulled and used and prodded and plucked, and whatever euphemism you want to use to say we've been used to be taken advantage of, and we don't know how to get out of the cycle. Who's our leader? Who's been the leader or the voice of us since '68, since the death of Dr. Martin Luther King? Regardless of your race, your religion, who galvanized, who brings us together to have a unified mind. That was one of the reasons why, he had to be dealt with, because not only did the powers that be see that he was being effective in unifying us as Black people, his next agenda was to unify all poor people, regardless of what their color was. And they could not have that. The powers that be cannot allow white poor to realize that they're the same and being treated and being exploited the same as Black poor. So, he's got to go. So here we are, left with the residue of not having a leader, not having an agenda as a people. And I go all the way back to the Willie Lynch syndrome of how we've been divided and pitted against one another, that we don't know how to support one another. We think when a friend of ours gets a business that we should go now to that business to get free stuff. What?
That's crazy.
Yeah, my homie has a restaurant. So I'm going to bring 20 people to his restaurant and have him hook us up. And he's not supposed to reap a profit. He's supposed to spend the money that he spent for the product that he has in his kitchen to treat me and 20 of my friends. And then when he says he can't do that, I turn around to him and say, "Oh, I thought we were cool." What? If we were cool, I would make sure those 20 people had $30 a piece and we're going to go support him. But that's not our mindset. And that's what other groups do.
Yeah. That is so true. That you're so right. I've had people come to me and say, "Okay, what is the discount?" Instead of them saying, "Okay, this is what I'm going to purchase because I want to support your business," or things like that. So, I guess my question is, how do we, as the people in the know, the educators, I'm gonna call us, right? Yes. Educate or inform, maybe inform is a better word to use, the rest of the community. How does that work?
I think it boils down to relationship and doing the best with what you have, and being transparent. So I look at so I mentioned about 10 years ago in the sports world, how 80 or 85% of those that were retired from the sports world, especially those of us that were African American, will be broke within 5 years. I believe that trend is changing now because of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in the era of sports that I grew up on, the brand of sports that I grew up on, these dudes really did not like each other. If you were on another team, I don't break bread with you. I don't eat with you. I don't hang out with you in the off season. Um, you didn't see relationships birth with the greats of the game until after they were retired, and it was birthed out of the respect that they had for that guy, for the time that they played, on the court together. So Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, for example, they had no friendship for the time that they spent opposing one another. But after their retirement, you saw them do commercials in the 90s, and I'm sure they have an amicable relationship. Nowadays, the young men, they play what they call AAU ball together. So before they get even to college, kids from different parts of the country are playing together. They spend time in camps together. So they're friends, and then they have social media. So they're friends long before they get to the NBA or get to these leagues. So then you have someone like LeBron James, who has an influence. So he just hit $1 billion. He just hit $1 billion status. Now he has the influence to impact the culture. As Black people, we always got to come up with a nickname for everything, right? So it's just not a billion now; it's a B, right? Now everybody's chasing that B. So he has the ear and the attention of his baller community and those that he's in connection with through social media, that he can at least be heard if and when he chooses to share some of the nuggets of how you break the curse of poverty, if you will. Now that's on a massive scale, right? I'm no LeBron James, you and cousin are no LeBron James, but we have a circle of influence. So even though I'm not where I want to be, what I do offer to my community and my concentric circle of influence is authenticity and honesty. I'm not where I want to be because I made these mistakes. Do not make these mistakes. If you make these mistakes, let me show you what it looks like. I'm still trying to dig out the mistakes that I made in my 20s. Now I'm 30 years later. Don't be like me. I'm not going to pretend with you that I have it all together. I have gained some knowledge over these years, and it's important that I pass this knowledge on to you, not only my failures, but also what I would love to do if I had to do it all over again. So for me, it's pouring into my protege, which is my son. So I'm able to, though I don't have it and I'm not achieving it, he will, and I'll be able to continuously point to him as an example of this is what the knowledge that I have can help produce, along with what he adds to his own equation. So in doing what we can do to push the next generation forward. My wife and I made a decision. We did not want our son to have any debt coming out of college. So we did the best Jesus impersonation that we could. We took on all his debt.
All right.
So we already had college loan debt. So we'll take on anything you don't get in scholarships. We'll take it on to position him that undergrad, no debt, grad school, he's getting paid to go to school. So we learned, I'm from the hood. So I'm all about a hustle. So we've learned how to hustle the system to say, okay, we're going to get these grad assistantships. They will pay for school, and any grants that you get, they will refund you. So that's So that in my small circle, it's now his job to make sure that his children, now that he's accomplished that and experienced it, okay, now how can you perfect that for the next generation? So then now I have access to his friends. So some of his friends are thinking about going to grad school, and I'm on top of them. Like, did you get any, you apply to any grad assistantships? No, what's that, Unc? Let me tell you about it. Look at this, look at that. Look at this website. Go talk to this person. Go ask about that person. Apply to these programs. So keep it, as the kids say, keep it 100. You know, keep it a beam. Let them, let those that you are in connection with know that I did not do all the things that I was supposed to do. I've learned some things along the way. Let me share those things with you. And then as you gain proof that your theory, if you will, works, share it, and put, like we do with goofy things in the hood. We put people on the, I've done this for less, right? I'll put people on to some goofy things in my goofy times, right? Why would I not put the people onto some thorough things in the thorough part of my life, right? So, and mentorship, that's another piece that we miss in our culture. Other cultures do it thoughtlessly. They don't even think about it. It's a part of their culture. That again was stripped of us, right? We have this notion, even for those of us that make it, we have this notion, oh, you got to make it on your own. Or we'll even say things like, oh no, I want to make it on my own. I don't want to listen to the old head. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. I went through what I went through so you wouldn't have to go through it. Exactly. Just go do this, go do that, go see this person, and they'll take care of you. But hey, you need this ticket, this degree right here, or you need this skill set right here to get in the game. So if anybody questions you once you get into the game, you can just pull out your certificate, pull out your skill set, pull out whatever the prerequisite is to get into the game, from education to, work in construction. But when you do these things, and then I have that the barbershop connection, you can get anything in the barbershop, right? When I had the barbershop connection in my circle, that's what mentorship should look like. Go see this person, tell them I sent you, and then you get slid right in. But you need to make sure that you have the things that you need to stay in. So.
That is so true. It just reminds me of a game that I used to play, and I still have it in my house today as a child, the game of life, because it was certain things you couldn't do in that game if you didn't go to college. And it was certain jobs you had. And that's how the world is today. If you don't have that piece of paper, even though you may have the knowledge already, right? But if you don't have that paper to say, okay, I finished this, then sometimes you can't get the other item that you want, or the other job that you want. So that is so true. Everything you said has been fabulous. I do want you to give us a little nugget or two about assistantships.
Okay, grad assistantships?
Grad assistantships, yes.
Okay. So I went to undergrad in the 90s, got my first degree, came out of school, worked, raised a family for 10 years, and then went back to school to get my master's, which we call grad school. Took out loans, and then 10 years later, I'm embarking on this journey to get my PhD. While working on my PhD and researching, I realized that there's a group of people that they don't pay for these degrees. They're called grad assistantships. So the highest, let's start with the highest, right? So if you Google, after we finish this episode, if you Google grad assistantships at the top colleges in the country, Yale, Princeton, Harvard, they pay you $30,000 a year to go to college, on top of giving you free tuition if you get accepted, because they want you to focus solely on school, and they try to offset your expenses. And if you're a single person with no children, no family, that's a pretty decent offset, living in the area of those particular schools, probably sharing in a housing or apartment or something. But you're able to eat, pay your bills, and for the 4 or 5 years of getting a doctorate degree at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Brown, any of those Ivy League schools, UPenn, if you're in Philadelphia, they pay you anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a year to go to school. Now, your state schools, they don't pay you anywhere near that, but they will offer you free tuition, and they will offer you a stipend. I believe in the state of Pennsylvania, most of the state schools will offer you about $1,500 a semester, and they pay it to you in bi-weekly payments over the semester. But in essence, if you get a grad assistantship, some grad assistantships are teaching, you do research. Some of them you teach, you help the professors teach at larger colleges and universities. What I think is the best graduate assistantship is the dorm coordinator assistantship, because you get an apartment, you get a little small meal plan, you get your tuition paid for, and you get the stipend. So I encourage every young person, when they're going into college, to try to become an RA, a residential assistant while they're in undergrad, so that they can position themselves to apply for those grad assistantships where they can get free apartment. They're a dorm coordinator. They are supervisors to the RAs that work for them, and they get housing, stipend, and food paid for. So, but if not that, at least get your tuition taken care of. And it's a hustle. They're hustling you to do work that they would otherwise pay someone like me a full salary for, 20 hours a week, right? And in exchange, they give you free tuition. The larger the school, the better the opportunity to get a grad assistantship. Smaller schools, smaller private schools, now you starting to get into what did we talk about earlier? Self-preservation, nepotism, right? We're gonna give it to people that are connected, as we would as well. But your bigger schools, the bigger the schools, the bigger the more need, and the bigger the opportunity. They still will take care of their people, but they don't have as many people as they have need. So right. we can get a seat at the table.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. When I went for my master's degree, I had a friend who went to a school in Philadelphia, and I was paying. And he said, "Why are you paying?" Right? Because this is what you could do. And I didn't know it. So I paid for my master's, but if I had to do it all over again, I would do exactly what you said.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because it just makes good sense.
Yes, ma'am.
So Dr. Graham, we thank you so much for coming. And I'm hearing feedback as well. We thank you so much for coming. We want you to come back when we're talking about relationships, and then Maurice will be the host of the show, because that is his field, is relationships. But we thank you so much for taking the time to come out to speak to us today. And we are thanking everyone on all of our live streams. We thank you all for coming. And we'll see you all next month, the last Wednesday of the month, from 6 to 7. And we'll say bye for now on Table Talk. Thank you all.
Thank you. God
Thank you.
bless.
Thank you.